We are at the regular council meeting of Tuesday, May 25th, 2020. It is 6 p.m. I call the meeting to order, and the first item is adoption of the minutes. There's 3 minutes: Governance and Operations Committee meeting of May 10th, 2021, public hearing of May 10th, 2021, and the regular council meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Governance and Operations Committee meeting, the public hearing, and the regular council meeting, all held May 10th, 2021, be adopted as circulated.
So moved.
Councillor Jones, do I have someone to second? Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, thank you. Does anyone see any errors or omissions? Hearing nothing, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. If any? Carried. Thank you. Our first delegation and our only delegation tonight is Richard Cannings, MP for South Okanagan West Kootenay, and today we are going to engage in a discussion of local and federal issues. So, Mr. Cannings, welcome, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation. Really appreciate it. And I'll just maybe say a few words, and then we could go straight to a Q&A session where I can more respond to what you're interested in. I have an idea of some of what your issues are. But federally, of course, we recently had the first budget in a couple of years, so that's taken up some of our time. We are actually just finishing off debate on that budget implementation right now. Or actually tomorrow. I gave my speech on the budget today, and I did spend a lot of time talking about what I think are the main issues in the riding right now, and that's housing. And so I talked about Penticton, I talked about Trail in that speech. So, and we can go into more detail on that. Of course, there's also been a lot of election chatter for the last 6 months, at least, about when the next election would be. The government, I'm sure, would have rather had it by now, but the pandemic has, stopped those ideas and those rumors. So looks like we won't have an election now till the fall. And hopefully we can get some things done in the interim. So again, maybe I'll just go to Q&A now, just so that we can really spend the time talking about what you're interested in specifically. I can guess, but I will just open the floor to you to ask me what the federal government can do for Trail.
Okay, so I'm going to open the floor now. Does someone want to address Minister Cannings? Councillor Kashoni, you're first, and you're on mute.
Richard, thank you for coming. I just wondered what the status of the low altitude crossing is going to be like at Juanita. For example, we know how much money the state of Washington has spent on upgrading their highways, and we just have that 11-mile run from not called North Fort into Juanita there. And I noticed they're closing the bridge for 2 or 3 days anyways. I know they're doing some upkeep on it, but is there any opportunity in this grant process for, for example, infrastructure to have that bridge upgraded from the single lane to at least a double lane?
Well, I think there's always an opportunity there. Those are, primarily provincial issues once you're getting into highways and transportation. The fact that this is an international border crossing that might play into it might up the ante for the federal government, but certainly when you have a specific infrastructure project like a bridge, if that's what the critical issue right now is, then that's something we should look into. The government, as you know, is keen on spending a lot of money, and So now is a good time to look into that. And that's about where I would leave it now. I mean, I could, if you have I don't know what the province is doing on this, but once you have a specific proposal ready, it's something that I can certainly find out about.
It's a LCIC issue that came through the regional district too, and also came through the city of Trail. So it's a economic development issue, but maybe we'll just talk to, maybe LCIC should be talking to you specifically, but I know it's a federal issue because it's a federal crossing. So
Right.
if you can find anything out about it at all, if you can maybe let us know what we might do, Richard, it'd be great. Thank you very much.
And I've certainly heard about the bigger project, but this one in particular, I'd be happy to look into that, see what
That's great.
funds might be available to.
Absolutely. Anything you can do, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dobie, go ahead.
And nice that you joined us, Richard. Thank you. You're probably hearing all through your writing, and we're all aware that this opioid crisis and homelessness is pretty well all across Canada. There's not many cities that aren't being affected. I just wondered if you could shed some information as to whether or not our government is going to declare across Canada opioid crisis. I think that's a reasonable assumption and probably a very good decision to be made. So could you give me your thoughts on that, please?
Well, that is certainly something we've been trying to get the government to do for a couple of years now. It's certainly done nothing but get worse and worse. More people have died from opioid overdose in British Columbia in the last year than died of COVID. And it's really part of this perfect storm of the housing issues we're talking about, just the increase in addictions, and then on top of that is, of course, the poison supply of fentanyl-laced opioids that are actually killing these people, and a lot of them are young people. I've talked to parents who've lost their children through this, people of all ages, and so it's very tragic. And so I think declaring it an emergency would be one thing, but I think really the way forward when you're talking about the opioid crisis is, here you have addiction, which is really a health issue. These people need health interventions. It doesn't help for them to be labeled as criminals. So I think first of all, we need to decriminalize the simple possession of these drugs. And then on top of that, provide a safe supply. So these people are addicted to opioids, and while they are addicted, they need a supply of those drugs. And if they are going onto the illicit market, the black market, the street to get those drugs, they're going to get bad drugs. They're going to overdose. A lot of them are going to die. Their lives are in disarray because they're having to commit property crimes, break into homes, steal cars, steal bikes, steal whatever they can to pay for these drugs. So if we provide a safe supply, we keep people alive and we get rid of that crime. In Penticton, there was actually an interesting, I don't know if it happened in Trail, but in the early days of the CERB payments, when a lot of people were accessing CERB in a improper way, shall I say, people that really shouldn't have qualified for it. During those few months back in last summer, property crime in Penticton disappeared. And that's because these people had the money to buy their drugs. And I'm not saying we should give people money to buy their drugs, but we should provide safe supplies of the drugs they need. And I think those two things would solve to a great measure that part of the problem. the deaths from the opioid overdose situation, because you're having drugs without fentanyl, and also all the crime and people using on the street because, you know, they're told you cannot, you know, don't use your drugs, you know, in a private place because you might risk overdosing by yourself. So people are using on the street. There's needles everywhere. And I think that would be much easier to deal with if we had a safe supply decriminalization program where we could then get those people into programs that would help them. So
Are you saying that that should also fall in with a safe injection site then? Once it's decriminalized and they know they're getting safe drugs? A safe injection site would certainly help reduce the amount of syringes that we're seeing in communities.
well, and that's what I mean. When you have a safe supply, we could, you know, find a model of how to provide that safe supply, and one would be, you know, a safe injection site. There's places to look for, you know, Portugal has been doing this for years now, decades. So we can look to them for some ideas, the best models on how to do that. But, you know, right now it's just unacceptable from every angle of how it's playing out, and we have to do something different. You know, it's not going to help. You know, we've had the war on drugs for 40 years now. It's just gotten worse. So we need to try something different. And I think and more people, when you have the Vancouver police force calling for decriminalization and safe supply, when you have all the health organizations across the country calling for that, to me, those are the experts in this. Those are the people that deal with these people with addictions every day, people who deal with the crimes involved. That's what they feel is the way forward. And it's clearly a federal issue. The decriminalization is certainly a federal issue. The safe supply is a health issue, could be federal, provincial, but we have to do this. British Columbia is calling on the federal government to do this. The city of Vancouver is calling on them. And that's where I think we have to go, and we should go there as expeditiously as possible before things get even far worse.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, any other questions? Go Sandy Santori.
A couple, and thanks for coming, Richard, very much appreciated. What's happening with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police? I'm sure you'll agree that nationally it's in a shambles, but let me put it in a small community perspective. We've had a complement of 14 RCMP officers now for, well, at least 10 to 15 years, if not longer. At any given time, we are very lucky to have 8 working at any given time. They've been working on a collective agreement for almost, 4 years? We hear it every year that it's just around the corner, just around the corner. The abuse of what's going on with people taking 2 years of leave, going back to work for a bit, and taking another 2 years off. And now with this opioid crisis, you know, instead of our RCMP being able to dedicate some time dealing with the criminals who are selling the drugs, you know, they're having to focus on what's happening with the most vulnerable people, and they're being made to look like the criminals, where our resources aren't going where they should be, and that's fighting the people that are selling these illicit drugs. You know, I think most counselors, Robert's been around for a long time, you know, we're getting to the point where we're tired of hearing about this so-called collective agreement and new agreement. And you wonder why, you know, communities like Surrey and others are becoming so disenchanted, and people are losing respect for our RCMP. And it's not fair, because it's not the individual RCMP officer's fault. There's a systemic problem in terms of that whole organization that needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, this past government hasn't been successful. The government before them didn't do a heck of a lot either, although I will admit they were a little tougher on crime. So I would really like to hear your views on what's happening with the RCMP.
Well, like you say, it's been going on for a long time. Actually, my first real sort of off the cuff speech in the House of Commons 6 years ago was on collective bargaining in the RCMP. And it was, I just walked into the House one day and the whip said, "We've got a spot here and you've got to speak on this in 10 minutes. And I had to, well, it was actually, I was given an hour, but I had 10 minutes I had to talk for 10 minutes. And so it was an issue then. And certainly one of the first things I did as an MP was go and visit every detachment in the riding, talk to the RCMP. And I was really bowled over by the discontent within the RCMP everywhere there. I'd call up the person in charge of the detachment, say, "Can I have a meeting with you?" And I'd walk in, there'd be 20 people there. Literally everybody who worked for the RCMP in that area was there at that meeting. I don't know who was out on the highways, but the morale situation was terrible, and I don't imagine it's much better. The pay was terrible. The RCMP used to be one of the most well-paid police forces in the country, and last time I checked, I think there were 75 police forces and they were 72nd in pay. So not many people are really wanting to go into the RCMP these days. I talked to one guy he was with the RCMP. His brother worked for the Delta Police, and he had worked for Surrey in the RCMP, and his brother had a much lower position in the Delta Police and was making $15,000-$20,000 a year more. So there's pay issues, there's staffing issues, there's like the issues you mentioned, going off on medical leave or whatever for a year at a time without getting any replacement for that. And trail is not, unfortunately, is not a one-off case. It's like that in Penticton, it's like that in Suyas. I know there's some Friday nights in Penticton where there's 3 RCMP on staff. One is a retired officer who's come in just for the night to help out, and one rookie and one regular officer. So it's a really difficult situation, and I've been hoping that this collective bargaining, getting one group to represent the RCMP would help that along, and it may yet, but it's just taken so long. It took literally 4 years for them to actually pick there was 2 or 3 competing groups that wanted to represent the RCMP. There was a lot of dysfunction about how that choice was made, a lot of discontent around that. I could go on, but it's not in a good place now. The last time I talked to the local RCMP head here in Penticton, he was hopeful that it was going to improve over the next year. That's all I can say. I don't know anything more about timelines about when changes will happen, but they will have to happen to get this. And like you said, one of the issues they're facing is the RCMP is ending up, you have officers doing things that other people should be doing. And when I'm talking about decriminalization of possession of drugs, I'm talking about, small personal amounts. We should, like you say, be still going after the people who are selling these illicit drugs, the poison drugs especially. And the RCMP should be really dedicated to that.
They are, but they just don't have the manpower to do it.
Social workers on helping, these people on the streets. And that's something that other people that are more trained for that should be doing.
And my only other thanks for providing that overview and sharing our frustration. My only final question, and one only has to go on social media and read newspapers. the West is getting very disgruntled with our federal government right now with respect to the oil and gas industry. It seems that Western Canada is non-existent when it comes to Mr. Trudeau's priorities and approvals and expediting applications. Yet in Quebec, we see pipelines being approved in an expedited manner. And in Canada and Western Canada, it just doesn't seem to be a priority. Now, I don't want to get into arguments or a debate over the environment. Sure, let's go green, let's do whatever, but we cannot destroy one industry until we know we can replace those jobs. And I'm not talking tourism jobs at $12, $15 an hour. If we're going to go green, let's do it in parallel and do a transition. But we need those high-paying jobs to be able to sustain families. I'm sure you're well aware, Richard. Vancouver is the most expensive place next to Toronto in terms of purchasing a home. Things aren't looking any better. Well, I guess if you own a home, it's looking good. But for those looking to get into a market, whether it be Penticton and now Trail, Castlegar, Kelowna, Nelson, you can't survive on $15 to $20 an hour. We need these high-paying jobs. And either these get approved and create these jobs, or let's find some new green industries that are going to pay the $35, $40 an hour jobs with benefits that Western Canada has been used to getting in the natural resource industry. And we're just seeing it totally getting depleted slowly. And well, one only has to look at what's happened in Alberta. And it's slowly coming here. We worry about tech and the mining industry. Will it exist in 5 years? I don't know.
Okay, well, it's a lot there, and I'll just try to touch on some of the points. And yeah, you're right. Just to start with tech, I think, Trail is very fortunate to have tech there. And I'm the natural resources critic for the NDP, and I sit on the Natural Resources Committee, and we just finished a big study on, critical minerals and mining that are needed for this transition. Tech will be playing a big role in that. Some of the things that we need most is some of the things that tech produce. I mean, copper is one of the obvious things if we're going to electrify all of our energy systems. As for pipelines, the downturn in the oil industry in Alberta, despite what you may see on social media, and I don't know what social media you look at, but the downturn in Alberta has got absolutely nothing to do with pipelines. It's all to do with world markets. It's all to do with world investments in the energy industries.
Mhm.
The conservatives will say, investors are fleeing the Canadian oil industry because of pipeline policy. The fact is, investors are fleeing the oil sector around the world at the same rate or even faster than they're leaving Canada. So, there's, I think, 21 oil sands projects in Alberta that have got all the approvals they need. They've got all the permits, and they're not moving forward. And it's not because of pipelines. It's because nobody's investing. And they're not investing because they look, these are all investments that take $20, $30 to amortize. And nobody wants to put that money in new projects that take that long to amortize when all they see is, this transition happening. The oil industry will still be making lots of money in 10 years, 20 years, but it won't be making money from new projects. It'll be making money from producers that have good supply that will still be pumping oil out of the ground. And I get very frustrated in the House of Commons when people accuse me and others of not liking Alberta, because I'm trying to point out the obvious fact that and I totally agree with you about needing good jobs, But we have to come up with not just a plan, but actually get out there and do things right now to show these workers that those jobs are there, not that they're going to be there in 10 years. And, it's difficult to replace jobs, in Fort Mac that, we're paying $100,000 a year or more. But we can at least replace them with good jobs, family supporting jobs that might be only paying $80,000 or $90,000 a year, but will be in every community in this country. So people don't have to go off to Fort Mac 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And there are ways we can do that. And that is happening. We have the manufacturing sector in Ontario just was totally hollowed out over the last 40 years. We lost a lot of, automobile manufacturing. Well, now that's starting to come back with electric vehicles. There's big plans in Ontario to, that are in the works now to reopen a lot of those plants to build electric vehicles, because that's where the people want. There was a poll out last month, asked Canadians, thousands of Canadians, what their plans for buying vehicles were. 70% said their next vehicle would be electric. So that says something about the opportunities we have for working in Canada. And it also says something about investing $15 billion in a pipeline that even the Canada Energy Regulator just put out a report before Christmas, said, we won't need that pipeline. We won't need Trans Mountain Pipeline. We won't need Keystone XL. We need one export pipeline. Line 3 is the one that's going to be quickest off the mark. That's the only pipeline we'll need for any projected production in Canadian oil. So, again, I guess I don't share your pessimism about the Canadian economy overall.
Oh, no, you're making me feel better. Actually, I wasn't aware of a couple of the things that you brought up. Sometimes you have to maybe consider the source and some of the articles that are coming out.
Yeah, and so I would, what I'm trying to do in a lot of my work in Ottawa around Western Canada is, let's have a plan to create these jobs here. There's a renewable natural gas plant going into Fruitvale.
Yeah.
That company wants to build a plant there, wants to build a plant in Grand Forks, it wants to build a plant in Oliver. And, those will create good jobs. Fortis is screaming for more renewable natural gas. And we have all this, forest waste that right now we just set it on fire every fall and burn it as slash. And we could be using it to create good jobs. So I could go on, but
no, I'm thankful for your enthusiasm. It kind of adds a little bit of light to sometimes a dark little tunnel. So thank you. I appreciate your response.
Hey, Councillor Jones, you had a question? With your hand was up.
Thank you, Mayor Payson. I did have a question, and I'm going to circle back to the opioid crisis, because you know what? Every day in our community, we deal with that. And I know you said that we have to do something different. And I'm really, really interested in what the government has planned differently than what we're doing now, because what we're doing now isn't working, clearly. We keep getting new people into our community that are on the streets and that are homeless and using drugs, and creating a very unsafe area for our community people, because that's where they're living on the streets. And is there something, do you guys have a plan or something out there that we can, I don't know, it's just so disappointing that nothing is happening, yet every community across Canada is dealing with it. And this crisis is not a priority for the government right now.
Well, it is frustrating. It's frustrating to everyone involved. And it's frustrating to me because, like you say, the federal government, I don't think is treating it as a priority.
Right.
The provincial government is doing what it can within its mandate. You know, it's kind of shackled by this problem that this is criminal behavior. So every time you have to do something to help these people with addiction, you have to get some exception from the health minister of Canada to, for instance, create a safe injection site. We could deal with all that much more efficiently if this was decriminalized. What we really need is, you know, to help the homeless is obviously to provide them homes, and these people need more than homes. They need supported homes
Yeah.
where they can get the help they need once they have a roof over their head. They need that help to deal with their addiction, and everyone who has an addiction is different about why they're in that state, why they have that addiction. So everybody needs different amounts of help,
Support.
to help. And, you know, I don't need to tell you all this, and we have to provide services in the community so that people in those neighborhoods feel safe. But I think the first thing to do for the homeless is obviously give them a home. And some, you know, it varies what proportion. I know in Penticton, it's, I think 45% of the homeless in Penticton have some underlying mental health or addiction issues, and 55% are just homeless. They just don't make enough money to afford rent, or, you know, there's no spaces. I mean, right now in Penticton, and I don't know what the situation in Trail is, but if you are someone on income assistance or disability pension and you're eligible for a subsidized housing, there are no places in Penticton for that. So if you are living in a house, you know, renting a suite in a house, and that house is sold, someone wants to build something else, or someone wants to move in, you're on the street. You know, there's no place for you. And you can't go from Penticton to Kelowna or Trail because it's the same situation there. You know, there was a family in the news here in Penticton a couple of days ago, you know, working family, renting a home, the house is sold. They literally could not find a rental suite to live in. So they put up a GoFundMe page to buy an old RV. So they're living in an old RV now. You know, it's ridiculous. And I know, so there is some federal money for new housing. It's not anywhere near enough, I would say. The provincial government is very keen on these housing projects, and I think you'll find a very willing partner in the provincial government to do that if Trail is serious about providing affordable housing, especially supportive housing for these people who need it. It's just a matter of, you know, often, and this is what we're finding in Penticton, it's often the hardest thing is finding community support that's broad enough to not throw roadblocks in the way, and, you know, neighborhoods that don't feel comfortable with, you know, a housing project there. So, you know, in Penticton, they've come up with guidelines that it can't be near a senior's home or a school or a whole list of things. And so it really
limits
where you can be. And Penticton City Council just voted down an application to build, you know, 2 big rental apartments, you know, and so it's, you kind of, and then people complain about the homeless. I don't know, it's a difficult, but I think the provincial government is very supportive. We've built 3 new affordable housing projects in the Penticton, greater Penticton area over the last 3 years, and all were done with total provincial money, not a penny of federal money, unfortunately. Federal government is getting into that. And so hopefully we'll start to see the results of that flowing from CMHC into BC Housing.
Richard, if I may, well, on Colleen's original question,
Sure.
and you hear this on the streets all the time, and I think most people will agree that Canadians are very compassionate, and they're the first country to come to the aid of other countries.
Mhm.
Now, having said that, and you say there's never been enough funding, and don't we take care of our own family first before continuing to send hundreds of millions of dollars to other countries? We will help. We've always helped, and Canada is known around the world for being helpful. But you
Well-
feed your own family before you start feeding others.
Well,
And you-
Andy, I'll just say we spend about half of what we used to spend in foreign aid over the past
Well, maybe we have to go to 75%.
by 50%. So we're not spending more, we're spending far less. We're spending far less than what the G20, all the other developed countries in the world want, when most of those countries spend a certain percentage of their GDP on foreign aid. We spend about half of that. So first of all, I would say we're not doing enough there. Second of all, I would say we can do both. We're a wealthy country. And what the NDP would say about housing federally, the federal government got out of the affordable housing business 30 years ago, and we have fallen way behind. And what the federal NDP wants is for us to build 500,000 units of affordable housing across Canada just to catch up to where we should have been. And this government is making some tentative steps, but we're only doing it about 5,000 units a year. So it would take about 100 years for us to catch up. So I think we need to be more bold. And again, we're in a housing crisis. We're in a opioid crisis. There's all these things that are hitting us at once, and it's scary and frustrating. But we've got to bite the bullet and say we've got to do something about this. If Trail, is a harder town to live in now than it was 20 years ago, let's do something about it. Let's do the same for the other communities in this area. And it's going to cost money. Let's figure out who's going to pay for it. Our whole tax system has become more and more uneven and unfair over the last 30 years. The wealthy people used to pay much more in tax. Corporations used to pay much more in tax. And I'm talking twice as much. 80% of people in Canada want a wealth tax imposed that would say what the NDP is suggesting is 1% on assets of over 20 million. I mean, very few people have over $20 million of assets, and they can afford a 1% tax. It would raise about $6 billion a year. 80% of Canadians want it, but the federal government is unwilling to bring it in. So those are some of the things where if we can get the super wealthy, the big corporations to pay their fair share, and the Americans are doubling down on this now. I mean, it's the one encouraging thing to me is that we've always been pointing to the states saying, well, they don't tax their people as much. Well, now they're talking about changing that. So, I think that once we get a fairer tax system where, the inequities between regular folk and the super wealthy start shrinking instead of every year they get bigger.
And Richard, the regular folks are paying more, and I'm not talking income tax. I mean, between provincial downloading and federal downloading, it comes like our municipal government should not be dealing with the opioid crisis. I mean,
No.
we can pass bylaws to accommodate, but we're putting our Like, for instance, our bylaw enforcement officer now is spending time doing that as opposed to doing what they were trained to do. And these are people that are not even trained in this field. We're
Yeah.
having to put up porta potties where municipal taxes were never brought into the picture to deal with those issues. So, and who's doing it? The average John Doe blue collar worker in Trail is picking up that tab. So we're the ones that are not income tax, but we're being taxed through our municipal taxes to cover areas that we should have absolutely very little or limited responsibility with.
And that's why I'm saying the federal government should step up in all these areas and do not just a little more, but a lot more, whether it's in housing or health or.
I'm done, and my blood pressure is going to go up, Richard.
I have some drugs I could give you, Sandy.
I'm already on them.
Okay, any other
Thanks.
questions?
Thanks, Richard.
Any other questions from the floor?
No.
Counselor Butler, go
No.
ahead.
I just had a quick question. Flight Air Canada, I just noticed that you had texted that there might be resuming service out of Calgary or out of Castlegar, pardon me. And I was just wondering, curious, why it hadn't been included in the first announcements that came out with the packages given to Air Canada.
Well, it's curious because I just got an email from my guy in Air Canada today that said that. And the last time I talked to him was when they announced when the federal government came up with that big bailout plan for Air Canada, all the low-cost loans that, had some strings attached. And one of the strings was that they had to renew these regional routes.
Mhm.
And at that time, they said, okay, we'll fly into Penticton, but we can't fly into Castlegar, they said, because Jazz, who provided that service, had sold off all their Dash 8-300s.
Mhm.
That was the only plane they liked to fly into Castlegar. So they said, and so we're not going to, Jazz won't be flying into Castlegar, but we're trying to find an interline partner, they called it, someone like Coastal Mountain Air. And then today I got this email that said, well, we've looked at that again, and we're going to fly Q400s into Castlegar, which
Okay.
a month ago they said they didn't want to do. So it's very good news. I immediately tried to phone this fellow and get the details on why they changed their mind and things like that, but he never called back. But the good news about Q400s is those are the planes that have the advanced avionics that if we had a navigational system set up in Castlegar, they could use that to provide more dependable service in the winter. And so right now they're supposed to come back, I think on June 28th, 3 days a week. I think it's Monday, Thursday, Friday. Afternoons, 3-4 o'clock type thing.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, I'll just close off and say thank you for visiting and spending your time with us today, albeit from Penticton. And I believe that, I know that we had written a series of letters to many of the federal and provincial ministries, and you were copied on them. And I would just appreciate it if you can keep those letters. They were obviously customized for every single ministry that we wrote to. And if you have any opportunity at all to advocate for our issues here in Trail, we would really appreciate that.
Well, and I've read them, and and as I say, I've been in touch with the provincial side of things because a lot of the issues you raised were some of the provincial ones around housing and health. So I have talked to a couple of those ministers, but I will make sure that the federal ministers know about this too. And as I said, I did mention how overwhelmed Trail and other communities were feeling with the crises in my speech today. So
Yeah, good.
hopefully that will start to get through.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Richard.
Richard.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Richard.
Have a nice evening.
Richard.
Have a good night.
Again, for the invitation, and I hope I can see you all in person next time we do this. Hopefully I'll be in Trail, so
Mhm.
that we get together more regularly, as they say.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Richard.
Okay, so item number 3 is public question period. Ms. McIsaac, did we have anyone send any information in, any questions in? No? Okay, great, we'll carry on. Item number 4.1 is a proclamation request for Access Awareness Day. And Saturday, June 5th, 2021 is Access Awareness Day. This is a day for communities to come together to celebrate what it means to be truly accessible and inclusive for everyone. Access Awareness Day falls within National Access Week or National Accessibility Week. And the theme of this year's Access Awareness Day is Say Yes to Access. The recommendation is for council to proclaim June 5th, 2021 as Access Awareness Day in the city of Trail.
So moved.
Do I have
Second.
Councillor Santori and Councillor Kashoni? Did I hear that right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this?
Yeah, just a question. Do they have a specific color that we could turn the lights on the bridge?
I didn't see anything
I
about a
didn't see
color.
anything in there. No, okay,
No, I didn't either.
okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
If any? Against if any? Carried, thank you. We're on to council committee reports. Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, you're first.
Okay, you, in the reading file, you'll find the Historical Society meeting and also the Museum and Archives Managers Report and the Collection Coordinators Report. And I'd just like to comment that on the front door for the month of April, we had 3,493 people, and at the gallery, we had 146. So people are still going to the Riverfront Center. And that's my report, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Gattafoni Robinson?
Nope.
Okay, seeing none, Councillor Santori, you're next, please.
Thank you. I'll report out on the GOC meeting that was held earlier. We had one delegation this afternoon, and that was Glendale and Tess Fillmore, who made a presentation for an off-leash dog park. They presented a petition of excess of 600 signatures. On that note, council did approve staff's recommendation to proceed with some preliminary work and implement a consultation process to bring back suggested sites, design, and public feedback for council to consider whether or not to move ahead with the off-leash dog park. We also received a comprehensive corporate services report from Michelle. It was received by council. From Parks and Recreation, Trish Davison brought before council the commercial use of parks. As a result of COVID, some of these private enterprises have been carrying out their fitness classes on public parks. And some members of the public had expressed some concern with that. But having said that, they have worked together with these groups and have come up with a rate of $65 per month, $315 for the season, but recognizing the pressure on the private sector during COVID, that's been reduced to 50% of those fees. This was done in consultation with the user groups, and I think they were quite pleased or will be pleased with the outcome. However, let's hope that some of the restrictions have been lifted and indoor fitness will be permitted again. I believe it is, but don't quote me on that right now. Council also approved the purchase of the Vector truck in the amount of $377,000, not including or excluding taxes. We also received our first quarter financial report for the period ending March 31st, and that was received and approved by council. We had three requests for grants. One was for the Trail District and Arts Council in the amount of $630, and that was granted by council. The career development services for their Getting to Home project will be funded to the amount of $12,000 with a $12,500 grant. And the Career Development Services Youth Center will be funded to the amount of $7,500 in grant funding. Both services deemed to be extremely important, especially during these challenging times of COVID and some of the crises that, like many other communities across the country, we're facing. And that concludes my report, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Councillor Santori? Okay, Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mayor Payson. I just have one item to report, and I did have the opportunity to sign off the collective agreement for the CUPE bargaining that we just did. So last Thursday, I went in and signed off the agreement, and that was kind of exciting, and glad that that went so smoothly. And that's my report.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Jones? Okay, Councillor Dovey.
What about Councillor Butler?
Yeah, let's go Councillor Butler. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mayor Payson. So on behalf of council, I attended the 3 following meetings. On May 18th, I attended the monthly Trail and District Chamber of Commerce meeting. And on the 20th, I attended the LCC TDS annual AGM, followed by that, the LCC TDS monthly board meeting. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Butler? No. Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Mayor Payson. I just have 2 short items. The first one is to do, and what this is, it's called Going Live with Vendor Market Picks. And what the vendors have the option to do is to pick one item or a produce, whatever they like. And at 10:30 on Saturday, we had live camera reporting with each vendor what their pick was and whatever story they had attached to the reason they picked what they did. So it's giving the vendors an opportunity for a lot of extra advertising as to what they offer in their booths. So we just started that last week, and I think that's probably going to grow with popularity. The other thing that I have to report is that the gardens, except for the big round planters, are all planted. And we expect that the planters will be finished and completed by this weekend. And that is a record-setting event for the Canadians in Blooms in terms of having the gardens completed before the end of May.
Good.
That concludes my report, Mayor Payson.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions for Councillor Dovey? No. Okay, Councillor Kashoni.
Okay, it's relatively short. We're dealing with this soil disposal at the dump. So for example, what happened was we agreed that and administration agreed that we hadn't put enough information out. So what happened is we're planning on providing information to our building department, as putting it on the RDT website, sharing through our social media. We're also planning on including the brochure and mailouts to the account holders, so that use of the McKelvey Creek landfill. For the individual, they went to, I have to thank them very much. They actually went to the individual who was complaining and got the soil tested for them so that they didn't have to hold up their project. So for one individual we found was expressing concerns, the THP group is working directly along with them in order to expedite the soil testing and approve to allow for disposal at the McKelvey Creek landfill. We do realize that in the transition period to a new process regarding soil disposal, that there will be challenges, but we're working with the THEC to help property owners as best possible, given the regulatory requirements required to meet. Most of these regulatory requirements, by the way, are provincial regulatory requirements. But I do want to say I was really happy to see that they have dealt with it at the regional district. They are working with the committee, and also they dealt with the individuals. I asked Michelle, and thank you, Michelle, for putting the Regional District Kootenay Boundary East End Services Annual Requisition and Budget Summary. This is what I ask for every year. So when you look at it, if you take a look at it, I advise you to keep it because it gives you a really good snapshot. It gives you a complete picture of everything. You know, for example, we're looking at a budget there in terms of $9 million, $9.7 million in terms of the budget for the Regional District East End services alone. And that's a huge budget. And then we've got other sections of the budget, but this pretty well gives you everything from the East End, and I've given you everything else. Now, what you will notice too, that if you were to look at the 2020 number, we would have 41.6%. And now we've been reduced to paying 37.7%. So it might not seem like much, but in actual fact, what's actually happening because of the increased assessments in the outside areas, we're actually moving down in what we pay. So it's 4% of the budget, but 4% of the budget amounts to something like $300,000. So as the budget goes, as the assessment goes up in Rossland and particularly in Montrose and Fruitvale and Area A specifically because of the construction, we're ending up paying a smaller percentage of the total cost. We used to pay well over 40%, then we went to 41, and then now we're back down. We're now down at 37.7. So that's a good thing. And in actual fact, it saves us money. It does two things. It saves us money, but it also costs more for the other 6 members. So that means it's less likely that they're going to be trying to stop the dam revenues going in because their costs are actually rising. Their costs rose over $300,000, the other 6 members of the East End 7. The next one is the washroom at the Transit Exchange. Never before, not once in all the discussions we've had, was the washroom separated out in terms of costing for that particular exchange. I know I read the letter from James. And so I'm raising it at the transit meeting on Nelson on the 31st. And also I'm going to raise it at the East End meeting in June. The reason being is that I don't believe it's reasonable to have the city of Trail alone pay for that particular washroom. I think transit, and they've been looking at this for years, they need to realize that now, considering not even COVID, but even after COVID's gone, I don't think many of the establishments are going to be allowing people coming in to use their washrooms. I mean, I just think that that's a thing of the past. That's going to be a common thing. So I'll be asking them to hopefully reconsider and look at that, because we would be paying the 20% regardless. Now, Nelson has made some agreement with some of its people in that area, which means when their transit exchange goes in, they have an agreement with 2 or 3 of the businesses who will let those people in. So I guess that may be an option if in fact we don't want to pay for it, or the East End refuses, or even if the East End doesn't refuse, if transit refuses to roll it into the actual cost. So that's an option. And I don't know how I might talk to John there and see what happened, but that's what I've been told so far. So that's the concern there. And the bump out concern, where the washroom was going to be would be right on the bump out in front of the C.S. Williams Clinic. And one bus would be parked on the side street there, so that you would have one bus parked right in front of the C.S. Williams Clinic, because that would be bus number 6. And then the bump out would include a washroom, and it would include a back-to-back washroom. One washroom was supposedly for staff, drivers, and the other washroom would be a public washroom. So sometime after the 31st, or maybe later in June, I'll be able to tell you exactly what they're prepared to do. I'm hoping they're more reasonable than they seem to be. And that's all the information. That's all the information. I have one thing to bring up, or 2 things to bring up under new business, and I've already discussed them with Michelle earlier. Thank you.
Ms. McIsaac, can I just ask you, I mean, maybe I missed it in prior discussions that the washroom is going to be in front of a piece of property that the city owns that could potentially be altered for development. What is the regulatory or the process for approval for that to happen. I would just hate to see a bus being parked there, a washroom being parked there, and have it impede development of a prime piece of property in the downtown core.
Well, my understanding was that a number of locations were being considered by the working group who's been tasked with identifying potential locations for the downtown transit exchange. I hadn't understood that a final decision had been made. I do know that BC Transit does want to come back to council to provide an explanation of the options that were considered and perhaps the chosen location. With that, some of the, I'd understood with the changes to the exchange, they would be looking at changes to the sidewalk widths, potentially in some locations. And so as Councillor Kashoni suggested, there might be bump outs. There would be some added space there available for, say, some smaller structures, but that hasn't come through directly to staff or to council for approval as of yet. But we do understand that transit is wishing to return. I understood their timing was around June or perhaps July in terms of the completion of their review.
I'll just clarify that. That was the very first proposal, was the one right in front of the colander. And if the one went in front of the colander, we would have to have a bump out on that side street right in front of the C.S. Williams Clinic, because they wanted the plan for the exchange is to provide room for 6 buses, and we don't have room for 6 buses right down the front. So the proposal, well, not the proposal, but the suggestion is that 1 bus would be on the back side of the of that particular street. Nothing is written in stone yet, and council will have the approval business anyways when they finally come through.
And then to clarify, Councillor Kashoni, the washroom is, you said one side is for transit workers, one side is the general public?
That was a suggestion made to BC Transit, and they never said anything about having that as an extra cost or anything. Never.
Right. And so to clarify, if you have the opportunity to bring any messaging back with respect to me bringing up the concept of having that as a self-cleaning washroom,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that would be probably implemented, I would imagine, just on the side for, I mean, it could be both, but definitely on the side for public use.
Yes,
so that
that would be it.
anyone would be able to have a clean washroom.
I've already mentioned that, and that, of course, is much more expensive. The self-cleaning washroom is much more expensive. But I really think in these terms of now, I don't know if you agree with me or not, I don't think businesses are anxious to have people using their washrooms. I know the Colander is not, they have a sign there. And I know that the one across the street, the thrift shop there, they don't allow anybody to come in there in the washroom. And also the washrooms at the community center are locked. So, you know, that would be the only option is for us to use, if we don't want any washroom at all, is to have an arrangement with the community center to use their washrooms. But I'll bring back more information after that meeting on the 31st.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Doby, you had your hand up?
Yes, Robert, in terms of the washroom and the need for 6 buses, what happened to the idea of bringing them around into the last block there so they'd have to come in on Portland? And they had the opportunity to angle park there because it's a one-way street at that point.
Yeah, that's still on the table.
It's still on the table because
Absolutely.
we had also discussed the possibility of being able to have access to the washroom at the basement level of the Selkirk building.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that would be the best solution. That would be the best solution of all, rather than
Yes.
using the Riverfront Center, which is
So
the
that's
next
still on the
closest one.
table.
Yeah, everything's on the table.
Okay.
It's just that BC Transit moves so slowly, unfortunately. Thank you, though.
Okay, any other questions for Councillor Kashoni?
Yep.
No, okay, I'll just go on to my agenda now, my meeting. So first is Social Housing Committee meetings. So there was renewed commitment to advocate for both short and long-term solutions to housing, to the housing crisis for vulnerable citizens. The committee noted that, you know, as much as there's much discussion around a supportive style housing and many communities needing that the interim strategy of having community members living in tents is not viable. So they are willing to step forward and advocate for not only short-term but long-term housing strategies. Had a meeting with the LCIC and Mayor Moore from Rossland. The BC PNP Entrepreneurial Immigration Regional Pilot Program is getting renewed. The LCIC is going through a couple sessions of teleconferences for the new metrics around the program. And this is a program that places suitable immigrants into defined skilled jobs. So they are going to be going through the process of understanding what the new parameters are for enrollment, which I believe are going to be expanded, which will allow more pointed access to meet needs in our communities. And then that is going to be brought back to council for discussion. So stay tuned for that for more information. With respect to COVID and vaccinations, young people now between ages 12 and 17 years old, born 2009 or earlier, can now register and get vaccinated against COVID. Parents, guardians, and trusted adults are also able to register and book for young people. Most vaccine appointments for younger people ages 12 to 17 will take place at the same immunization clinics used to vaccinate other or adult people in our age groups, unless there's a pop-up or a clinic for a smaller community. BC, the province of BC is really encouraging parents and families to come together. From the feedback that they had, they really heard that parents want to bring their children with them to get vaccinated. So when listening to Dr. Bonnie Henry, of course, everyone is being encouraged to register, but if you are an adult with a vaccination appointment, you can bring your child along. You can call in advance or just show up with your child and get them registered. She said the clinics are going to make every effort to vaccinate families together so that it's convenient for families. I just want to circle back with respect to a question that Councillor Gattafoni Robinson asked me after the last meeting. So when I was talking about registration, and she asked, what about the more senior individuals and the over 80s that were vaccinated in the first wave? So upon clarification, so those that were vaccinated on or before April 15th, which are generally those over 80, the province of BC has a record of your vaccination, but they don't have you in the provincial system because they don't have your personal information. So it's impossible for them to do a recall notice on you. Now, those who live in long-term care or extended care facilities that are in a known facility, the province will be going to those facilities for second doses. But for anyone who was vaccinated in the first wave, they're asking that you go on the provincial website and register yourself, and then you will get a text or an email indicating that when it's your time to book for your second vaccination. So I hope that clarifies that. So again, encouraging everyone, regardless of how you got your first dose, to go on and register. The system will not allow you to register twice. So what I mean by that is if you register twice, you're not going to have two entries in the system. The system amalgamates your two entries. And I encourage everyone who maybe, have grandparents or in a situation where they know someone who doesn't have internet or it's going to be difficult for them to register, to please reach out to your fellow community members, family members, friends, and really encourage them to register. And maybe you can even help them register.
Yeah.
So ways
There's no
to
phone
register.
number?
Pardon me?
There's no phone number?
I'm giving that right now.
Okay,
So you can register by calling 1-833-838-2323. You can also go down to the Service BC Center in Trail and they will help you register, or you can go onto gov.bc.ca/get vaccinated. So you can just do a Google search and go onto the provincial website and get vaccinated. It's very easy. And just want to remind everyone that the BC CDC is the best source of vaccination information that we have. So next, I want to just talk about Tourism Week. Tourism Week is May 23rd to May 30th. So we're in the middle of celebrating Tourism Week. And the City of Trail encourages all residents in our region to explore their own backyard and support local during Tourism Week. Small businesses and tourism operators have really been hit hard by the pandemic. It's been an extremely challenging time for local businesses. And so Tourism Week is really an excellent opportunity to celebrate and support our local accommodations, attractions, restaurants, and retail businesses. And although the province may be opening up somewhat with the pandemic restrictions, I encourage everyone to shop local and support all of our local businesses. The vibrancy of our communities really depend on it. And you can also visit the Trail Visitor Center and the Riverfront Center for any resources that you need on local accommodations and attractions. Next, as I go through my list here, is our homeowners grant. So just a reminder that Friday, July 2nd is taxation deadline for home property taxes. This year, the provincial government has made a change, so we can no longer accept the homeowner grant applications at City Hall. And I know that City Hall is already receiving a lot of calls from people who are confused by this. So again, reaching out for those who may know someone who may have a hard time getting to City Hall, getting access online, or maybe just doesn't have the ability to register, please reach out to them and help them register. You must claim your homeowner's grant before you pay your property taxes. So that is before July 2nd. So ways you can register for the homeowner's grant: call 1-888-355-2700. You can go on gov.bc.ca/homeowners grant. I think if you probably do just a Google search, that'll come up as well. And so again, just please be wary of that so no one gets late payments. And I just want to circle back one last thing with Councillor Kashoni with respect to the soil testing that he mentioned. And it was on my list today, and I just want to provide some clarification because this does align with the Trail Health and Environment Program. So there was a change in regulation, or an enhancement of a regulation, where within no contaminated soil can be accepted at landfills. So this is not unique to Trail, it's across the province. And the Trail Health and Environment Program Spring Newsletter brought forward this information. It was on the back page, and it created, I think, a little bit of maybe confusion because it was the first time that it was really announced to the public. So free soil testing is available for all properties in Trail and in direct outlying areas such as Casino, Oasis, Montrose, Rivervale, Warfield, Annabelle, and Juanita, all the areas within the environmental management area. The RDKB has an updated contamination soil policy, which establishes criteria and procedures for soil disposal at RDKB landfills. So, I mean, the crux of the matter is if you are planning any landscaping projects and you feel that there might be soil that you need to get rid of and dispose of, and you had planned to do that at the landfill, what you now need to do is you need to just get in touch with either the RDKB's Environment Services Department or the Trail Health and Environment Program Office. And what you can do is you can arrange to get soil testing done on your property. And that soil testing will allow the RDKB and the group to analyze whether it is safe and appropriate for you to dispose of your soil at the landfill site. Again, this testing is free for soil management, and you can sign up online at thep.ca. And you never know when you might need to do a renovation or want to do a renovation. So I encourage everyone, just get your soil tested. It really helps us build a database as well of what the soil profile looks like within the City of Trail and within different neighborhoods. For the THEP, Trail Health and Environment Program, the office number is 250-368 3256. And if you have any issues, they can help you with that and provide you guidance and how to navigate through the soil management process. So that is my report for tonight. Councillor Dobie, go ahead.
Hi, I have two questions. So if somebody's already gone through the soil remediation program and had their yard tested, and it's come up as an indicator that they don't need to do anything, their yard is safe, does that still cover your yard if you now took something out to change your garden around or whatever? Or do you have to repeat the process?
If they have a soil, if you have your soil tested and they have the data bank, they should have it in the data bank. You should not have to get it retested. Each homeowner is provided the numbers of what their soil comes in at, and they should have that. And if not, the Trail Health and Environment Program would have that database.
Okay, my other question, if I could just go back to when you were talking about the people that had their vaccination before April, what was that date again?
April 15th, 2021.
Okay.
So basically, if you were in the first wave of vaccinations.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mayor Payson.
And if you're unsure, just go online and register, because again, the system will accept your registration, but you won't have a duplicate registration in the system. So there's no harm in going on and registering twice at all. And then at least you know you're covered off.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
Lisa?
Yes.
Yeah, it was nice to put that information about the soil testing on our website again, and maybe on Facebook again for people. When I got my soil tested, and I encourage everybody to get it tested, regardless of whether you're doing landscaping or not, they provided me with a numbers and a letter, a report. And I think if you go up there and you have that report and you show that report and it shows that it's not contaminated, that would be one of the ways I've kept my report. And I think people should test them, have it tested, and then they can have that report there and they have no difficulty disposing of the soil. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? None? Okay, so consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda. Report for invoices paid for municipal services April 1st to 30th, 2021. Access BC campaign universal coverage of prescription contraception, and letter of appreciation from the KBRH Health Foundation. Does anyone want any of these items pulled out? If not, the recommendation is that the items on the consent agenda be received for information.
So moved.
Okay, Councillor Dobie has moved receipt. Do I have someone to second that?
I'll second it.
Councillor Jones, thank you very much. Any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. All right, now it's new business. So I open the floor. Councillor Kashoni.
I spoke to Michelle earlier. I had some questions from different individuals, a couple of emails and a couple of them on Facebook about the TELUS proposal. It was in the paper tonight, and I wanted to make sure that maybe Michelle could clarify the process. I didn't respond. What I responded saying was that hopefully staff will be able to provide some information publicly tonight. If you could do that, Michelle, please.
I certainly can. The public consultation process that's currently underway is being performed by TELUS. And so all property owners within 157 meters of the location where a telecommunications tower is proposed have received a written correspondence from TELUS that invites comment. The last page of the package is fairly straightforward. It asks if they're a cellular phone or wireless device user, do they feel it's an appropriate location for the proposed facility, asks if they're satisfied with appearance or design, and it allows people to direct their comments, concerns, both positive commentary or negative, through to the consulting firm who's doing this work on behalf of TELUS. It would be premature for the city to discuss the process because TELUS has a responsibility to undertake the consultation, and they will then come to us with the results and a request to utilize the Pope Park location for the installation of a tower. And we'll expect that reporting in July. Based on the public consultation, they have notices going in the May 25th and 27th trail times, and I believe it indicates that 30 days after the last issuance in the newspaper, they're accepting comments. So people should be directing their comments directly through to TELUS, not to the City of Trail, not through council. So if anyone is getting in touch with you directly, please direct them back to the TELUS communication and to the email attention that's included within the correspondence.
Thank you very much. I just have one other issue. New
Okay.
business. We had the spray park was broken or was fixed first, but then it was actually another problem with it, and so they had to be fixed again. And then, of course, it came online. We also had an advertisement in the paper for a position at City Hall, which I only became aware of when I watched it saw it on the newspaper. And I guess the other one would be the tower, which my understanding is that staff has been dealing with it for a little bit of a time. So what I'm making a request here is that some of these things, it's much easier if we're notified of these particular things. I would have, first I'll make it specific. I would have liked to known that the spray park was broken and then it was fixed and it was operational what day. I would have liked to known that there was an opening at City Hall in the finance area, and I would have liked to known that this proposal for the TELUS tower was there. All three items, I had no idea about them. So when I first was telephoned and then emailed and then of course contacted on Facebook, I had to tell them, well, I didn't really know about these things. And I don't think it's a lot to ask to be kept up to date. I mean, not on every little tiny thing, but something that's what I consider to be major happening. I would ask that maybe staff can take a look at it, or you can talk to staff and see if we can be, all council could be updated so that we don't get in a position where, for example, somebody's talking to me and about this tower. And honest to God, I had no idea at all about the tower. And that's why I didn't say too much about the tower. And that's why I referred it to Michelle. But it would have been really nice to have known about it ahead of time. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but I like to know about things. And I don't mind getting an email telling me about something. Thank you.
Would you like?
Sure.
I can respond to Councillor Kishoni's concerns. I can appreciate a desire of council to be in the know of obviously the important goings on. I do want to remind though that these matters were considered to be operational in nature. So if we keep in mind the governance structure, you are the decision makers, and as a result of decisions made at council, we implement them at the administrative level. With respect to project repairs, I don't know the scope of the spray park repair that was necessary. It would have been an operational matter and perhaps thought by staff not important enough to warrant communications through. With respect to our staffing issues, we employ in excess of 75 full-time employees. We have comings and goings and vacancies quite often. Perhaps because it is a City Hall position where council is more in tuned and knowledgeable of the folks here, there would have been more of an interest. But again, it's just understood to be an operational matter. When we have a vacancy occur, we begin our recruitment process for that. So our apologies that you weren't in the loop, but it wouldn't have been thought to warrant special communications out with council. And similarly for the TELUS, I could have provided you with advance notice of the communication package, and I do apologize, and I did earlier today with respect to not doing so. It was a busy week for me last week when I became aware of the correspondence going out. But again, this is a TELUS directed matter. It wasn't communication from the city. And so it's felt important for TELUS to be able to answer to the questions and speak to the feedback received when it comes back to you. If council had a wholesome knowledge of the proposal, you may engage more in discussion rather than referring it to TELUS. So for those, I can appreciate your request to be more advised, but we just have to be cognizant of what we don't want to inundate you, I guess, with information, with the details of operational matters.
Sandy, do you have your hand up? I just don't know if that was a pen that waved. No? Okay, Councillor Dobie.
Michelle, I just have a question. Do we know when it's this particular employee's last day?
Councillor Dobie, I just say that that's probably an HR matter, and I don't think that it's appropriate that we speak to it in an open meeting. It's a personnel matter. And I think what would be appropriate is that if you have further questions on this, that you direct them to CAO Per Hudhoff. Any other questions or anything else under new business? Okay, good. So we will move for adjournment. It's 7:26 p.m.